So my goal is just to get at least 3 different pieces of geometry on stage in motion, along with a little bit of staging, some other geometry to help kind of contain the space and the environment that we're in, and just experiment with what the capabilities of animation are. And I want to throw some lights into the equation. I want to do some really quick test renders, and then I'll render out a final animation. And so what I'm going to do right now is when by default, one of the things that I want to do is make sure that my playhead is always back at the beginning of time. So I'm just going to rewind the playhead and start from frame 0. I'm going to introduce some new geometry, and in this case, I'll choose maybe a torus or maybe a cylinder. It's up to you. Just, pick something and have fun with it. And this time around, the torus, I'm just going to do a real simple rotation, and before I animate, maybe I'll change the parameters a little bit of the animation or the object itself. Okay, so I'll just make that a little bit bigger. And the concept here is that maybe I want this animation to start a little bit later in time. Okay, and so rather than marking the first keyframe on frame 0, maybe I'll advance the playhead to frame 30, and now I'll record the position, the scale, and the rotation at frame 30 of the torus. Okay, so when I scrub the playhead, the torus doesn't do anything. Okay, now I'll advance the playhead to the end of time. I'll grab the rotation tool, and I'll just rotate the torus around nearly 360 degrees. I could key that value in if I wanted to, but I'll just eyeball it, and I'll record that last keyframe. So now I'll scrub the playhead, and I see my torus kind of swinging in space. And I got lucky; I didn't have any obvious collisions with my geometry. Not that it would make a difference, but and you'll notice that the first 30 frames of time, that torus doesn't do anything. It just kind of sits there and stays still, and that's because we marked that first keyframe at frame 30. So whatever position the torus was in to begin with, it remains in that position, and it starts its change between frame 30 and 90. Now, in the future projects, future presentations, we're going to break down animation, and we're going to study it, and we'll talk about different theories and concepts of animation. But for now, we just really want to get some stuff moving on stage. Okay, I'm not really worried about any materials at this point. I just want to get a couple of things moving. In addition to that, I'm going to introduce some lights into the equation. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce a plane object, and this will help really kind of define the space that we're in. So I'm just modifying the width and the height of this object, and maybe I'll make it 2000 high by 2000 wide, and that gives me kind of a space to work in here. I'll take that plane object, and with the move tool, I'll just kind of move it down a little bit. And again, I just want something in this space that I can see that helps contain the space, something that will capture shadows as I start to introduce some lights. That my sphere disappears underneath. That's okay, because I'm not really concerned about composing the animation, just want to have some fun with it. So I'm going to introduce a light into the equation, and I'll choose a really simple point light, and I'll pick up that point light. I'm just going to scroll out with my mouse wheel. I'm holding down the 1 key and clicking to pan around, and I'll just move the position of that point light. This will be my main key light, and so in fact I'll even call this key light. This will be the one casting the shadows, and so I'm going to go down to the shadow pull down menu, and I'll choose shadow map soft, and maybe I'll reposition that light just a bit. I'm going to add a little bit of color to it. Maybe I'll get some blue going here. A little bit goes a long way with lights, so I'll just turn that blue, and I'm going to give that a real quick test render. So I can click on the render button here. I can choose to command R. That's what my scene looks like. Again, I'm not looking for anything, fantastic, beautiful, or wonderful. I just wanted to be able to see something here, and I got some shadows. Those shadows will animate. So if I just scrub the playhead, change the position, give that a quick render, I have different shadows happening, so that makes it a little bit more of a dynamic environment. I'm going to create an additional light, and this will be a simple fill or light, and I'll just use the point light. And I'll move that back in space, and maybe I'll set this light to kind of a yellowy orange. Okay, and so I kind of have a little bit of contrast in my lighting scenario. That light's a little too intense, the yellow light, so I'll kind of tone that intensity of that light down quite a bit, maybe to say 50%. I'll do a quick test render, and that looks pretty good. That's really all I want to do. That's all I want to experiment with. If you want to, you can throw some materials on these things, but for the sake of the demonstration, I just wanted to get something that was staged in a really simple way. I'm going to rewind that animation, and I'll hit play, and I can see inside Cinema 4D I get an approximation of what my animation is going to be. Okay, so that's just in really simple terms, I have my animation set up, I have it staged. Again, there's some visual conflicts that are going on, but I just want to get some results going for now. We'll be a little bit more intentional about the way that we design, create, and compose things. Right now, we just want to focus on creating and breaking animations. So in the next presentation, we'll catch up and I'll talk to you about the pipeline and how we're going to set up renders and output the render so that we can actually have a QuickTime movie of this animation, and then we can post it to Vimeo. So we'll do that in the next presentation.